Hi, what's up? What's up? Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our webinar for tonight. Are you guys all here?
The game begins in 3.
Welcome, and thank you for coming here to our webinar for tonight. I am Casey Oiko, and in behalf of TEDS, I would like to welcome you all for accepting our invitation to be with us in this online event and to learn something new at the same time. So this webinar is brought to us by TEDS. So you may be wondering what TEDS is. TEDS actually stands for Travel, Explore, Discover, Shoot. This is a community where we want to connect curious cats and creatives. And by curious cats, we mean to say travelers or people who love to explore places and discover new things. And this is us, right? So we also want you to push yourself to be more creative in these areas. You could be a photographer, a filmmaker, a content creator, or basically a storyteller. So TEDS is actually a community where we want to learn, inspire, and be inspired from one another as we share and hone our own individual talents, interests, and passion. So what we're doing currently in TEDS is that we curate photographs from different people on Instagram, showcasing the beauty and the different sides of Singapore. May it be something touristy, something local, or anything picturesque. It could be a place, a building, an event, food, or anything that could serve as a guide for other people who want to explore and discover this little red dot. Okay, so we also help you creatives in exposing your art to the public. We help build audience for you through featured posts in our community. So enough for TEDs. I would just like to welcome you once again to our platform here at Go Brunch. So as you can see, there you have your chat box. Feel free to type anything if you have any other concerns or issues. The Go Brunch support is here with us to help us in any issues that we have. So I know you guys are all excited for the main thing for tonight. I hope you guys had your dinner because, or maybe at least have some food with you, because at this moment, we'll be giving you something that will not only feed your hunger for food, but will also feed your brain, right? With a valuable lesson. So due to this pandemic, we know that most of us are actually staying at the comfort of our home. So most of us are enjoying our kitchen, yeah, either eating or cooking. So we have decided to bring you something good, all right? So for this session for tonight, we will be learning, or we ask you, or we invite you to step up your game in taking good quality photos of your food, yeah, through food photography. So are you guys excited for our speaker? All right. So without further ado, let me introduce to you to our speaker. Our speaker actually is a Filipino photographer based in this sunny island of Singapore, specializing in food and beverage photography. He is an art director at Food News Agency, where he has worked on brands like Asia's 50 Best Restaurants, the Singapore Cocktail Festival, JW Marriott, and many more. So other than food, our speaker also do travel and street photography on the side. So are you guys excited? I'm sure you are. So without further ado, let me introduce to you to our speaker, Nikko Pascua. Ding, 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 ding. Yes, a round of applause, everyone.
Hi, good evening, everyone.
Yay!
I'll just imagine I
Yes,
can hear people actually clapping. um, are we
how are you
going to
feeling tonight, Nikko?
just get right
You're on
onto
full
this?
house.
Shall I get started?
Okay,
Uh,
yes, please do. So I'm using
okay.
virtual state now of yourself.
All right.
So ladies and gentlemen, Nikko Pascua.
Sharing my screen and okay. So, please bear with me because I cannot see myself now that I'm on presentation mode. Nonetheless, hello and welcome. I'm Nikko Pascua, and thank you to everyone who decided to spend your Friday night, Friday morning, wherever you guys may be, here with us to hopefully learn some stuff about food photography. What I can tell you early on is that it's gonna be tough because I have like almost 30-minute limit to go through whatever it is that I can teach you. So I'll be talking fast, um, and I'll be sharing an overview of food photography, I'd say. So besides my process, we're also going to be talking about a bit about my experience as a food photographer and how my food photography might relate to travel photography. So just a little bit more about myself to those of you whom I don't know personally. Um, I started being fascinated with cameras really early on. As in, I remember as a kid, I would always fiddle with my family's point and shoot camera and just be wondering, like, how can this mechanical thing produce photos, which serves as documentation of moments? And it's always been a fascination, and it carried on until high school, until when I went to uni. I've always been just taking photographs here and there, and then cut to 2012. My one of my high school best friends, his family runs a Japanese restaurant in our hometown, and he asked me if I can take photos of their food, and because I love their food so much, um, I of course said yes. And these are the images from that first ever food photography stint. So clearly, I didn't know what I was doing. You can see surfaces. You see the scratches on the surface. The vessels, lots of blemishes here and there. Styling is all over the place. Definitely a lot that could be improved. Although, if someone were to send these to me, someone who's starting and will send this to me now, I'd say there's some potential. Maybe there is something out there. Quality of light, I'd say, is okay. This was taken in natural light, and your specular highlights are there. I'll be touching more on that later on. But yeah, so what really got me into this whole food shoot was when my best friend's dad came up to our set, and he was like, Nico, feel free to try any of the food items you'd want. And at that moment, I was mind blown when I realized that I get to eat and shoot at the same time. And then I realized I love food and I love shooting, so why not do food photography for a living? And so here we are. um, Cut back to 2015, I was fortunate enough to be given an internship position over at pepper.ph. To those who are not familiar, Pepper is I'd say it's the best food blog in the Philippines. And it was a really great opportunity for me. These were some of the images taken during my internship. Um, it was such an amazing time for me because I get to play around the studio of Maylin Chong. So I get to work with her props library, which is what dreams are made of, if you ask me. So there, again, all of these were taken with natural light. So some styling here and there with the help of the team, of course, because I was still just an intern then. And then actually, it was also through Pepper, like one of my ex bosses, Mika. Um, is the one who connected me to where I'm at now, which is, as Casey has mentioned, with Food News. So we are a peer agency who works mostly with F&B brands. And well, although it's the bulk of that we do is PR work, where I come in is whenever our clients would need media photos for, say, magazine or newspaper features, or even for their social media. That's where I come in. And some images taken for our clients, so like more recent stuff, stuff for Whitegrass when they reopened. A more recent work, this cheese photo, which I took for some Pierre. And then what else? We also handle Singapore Cocktail Festival, a time of the year that I always look forward to because of the many drinks available. This is always fun. But at the same time, of course, every now and then I still do my personal stuff just to keep my chops updated. And then what else can I tell you? Um, that's pretty much it, I guess, about me. Now, I guess I'd share a bit of my experience as a food photographer. So, of course, as with any job, there are challenges. And what else could there be? But of course, COVID-19 is in the forefront of challenges, not just for me, but for everyone, I believe. Um, so yeah, it's been tough ever since this whole COVID-19 thing started. Um, all my shoots have been either postponed or canceled altogether. More on that later. Challenge in terms of balance, as in, so because with my food photography, I always work with my clients. So with that, of course, I have to answer a brief from them. I have objectives to accomplish, but at the same time, they hired specifically me. So they wanted my expertise. They wanted my point of view. So given that, there also has to be a touch of my creativity into the output. So it's finding that right balance of um, doing my clients' requirements and at the same time showcasing my creativity and what I actually bring into the table. So that can be a challenge every now and then. And of course, being stuck in creative ruts, like as with any other creative, there are times when I do get stuck in a rut. I'd be editing a photo set for God knows how long, how many revisions myself that I have to do, and still not end up with good work or work that I can be happy about. And I think the best way to go about creative rut is to try to ask for help, look for a different perspective, ask your colleague, ask your audience, ask your boss, ask your friends, so that you have fresh eyes looking into your work. And that always helps every now and then. Now, on to the fun part. Fun part. um, Meeting chefs and bartenders is always fun. I'd say it's one of the best things about my job. Um, in the same way that we're all very fascinated watching Ugly Delicious, Chef's Table, Mind of a Chef, it's because there's a lot to be learned from even just having conversations with these chefs, these bartenders, their creativity, their leadership, and their overall point of view is something that's very um I guess you really have something to take away whenever you have a conversation with these people. Next is the free food. Okay, just to correct a misconception, because I think this is the question I get asked first after they learn that I am a food photographer. I don't always get free food, to be honest. Sometimes the chef would want to give the food to his or her staff instead, if the food is edible. And by all means, I mean, that makes sense. That's only reasonable. But there are also times when chefs are kind enough to let me try their food. So, like, say, if a 2-star Michelin chef would ask me, Nico, would you want to try my food? Feel free to try this and that and this and that. Of course, you say yes to that. So there are some lucky days, which is always good. And then what else? The process. Okay, as cliche and as cheesy as this may sound, but I actually do enjoy the process. From lugging around my equipment, my heavy equipment bag, my colleagues would know, um, up to the back and forth of revisions with my colleagues and with clients. I don't mind all of that. It's really just really fun for me, this whole process of doing food photography. So with that, speaking of process, we go now to the meat of the presentation. What I'll be sharing with you is, I think, pretty much how I went through doing my most recent Instagram post. So if you follow me on my Instagram, on my main Instagram account, I posted a photo last night of a karaage that I cooked yesterday. Um, and I sort of made a case study for it. So um, let's go through it. First, of course, is research. As with anything in life, you cannot take action. You cannot take another step unless you have a good grasp of the situation. You have enough information with you to bring along to the battle. So for this purpose, since we're talking about cooking your food at home and taking photos of whatever it is that you cooked, um, we're focusing on like research for food photography for home cooking. So of course you need to research your recipe. If you don't know how to cook whatever food item it is that you're thinking of taking a photo of. So that's what I did too. And this recipe from Tasty is actually really on point, I have to say. Excuse me. After that, you also need to research what's being done. How is the food item being photographed before? What props goes into the photographs? How is the food plated usually? Are there any action shots needed? So some things that you also need to be looking at when doing your research for food photography. Of course, again, this is just an overview, and you can be thorough with your research as much as you'd want. But for the sake of this presentation, we'll move on. So once you have all these little ideas in your head of what maybe, how maybe your photo will look like later on, you move on to step number 2, which is to sketch your ideas. My ex-boss from when I was in advertising would always nag me to, Nico, sketch your ideas. Even if it's just thumbnails, a really, really rough sketch, it's important that you sketch your ideas, because from all those bits of ideas in your head, the sketch is the visual translation of those ideas. It turns your ideas into something more tangible. So you know how things will look like. So for the karaage post, these are my 2 sketches. So I was exploring if I want to do a top shot or if I want to do a 45-degree shot. But I know that besides the karaage serving, I also want to incorporate a rice bowl and also dipping sauce into the frame. So I'm sort of also thinking like, okay, what other props do I want to include? Do I want to include some folded cloth or some mat, or like what kind of layering will I be doing with the surfaces? Stuff like that. And then once you're done with your sketch, you move on to the next part, which is to actually cook food. Now, when it comes to cooking food, I'm not the best guy because I also only mostly follow recipes. So if you do find a recipe that you want to try out, just follow the steps. Do not improvise yet, okay? Uh, so there. And then after cooking the food, I guess then you need to shoot it. I think this is one of the most fun parts, I have to say. And then when it comes to shooting, there are different components, elements that you have to consider, that you have to be conscious about when doing your shoot. And with each component or element, whatever, that comes into shooting food that I'll be discussing, we can do another episode just talking about each component. So again, this is just going to be an overview of each component, huh? I keep on saying component. First, of course, is composition. Composition, basically, it is the way the objects appear and how they relate to each other in your frame. So the best way to talk about composition is to talk about the rule of thirds. As with any other form of photography, I think this would be the most basic principle to apply when it comes to composition. So with the rule of thirds, to the unfamiliar, it's basically dividing your frame into 9 equal rectangles and putting your subject in one of the 4 points where the lines intersect. So for the Karaage photo, this was the photo I posted last night. So as you can see, the Karaage bowl intersects directly with this, more or less, with this lower right point. And then the rice bowl doesn't go overboard the first column. And then you have also the dipping sauce interacting with this second vertical line. So yeah, besides, oh, no, not yet. um, the next slide is going to be a time lapse of how I arrange the whole thing. Let's just watch. So there. And again, just going back to the image. Mhm. There you go. So this was my final image. Okay, now I'm going to go through a bit of some of the other grids or guide systems that is available. But personally, I haven't also explored these guides. Maybe they're a bit too advanced for me, or I don't know. I'm just still mastering the rule of thirds. So you have your triangles, you have your golden spiral, you have your golden ratio, and you have your diagonals. So, yep. Again, feel free to explore these. If you're in Lightroom and you're in your crop tool, just press, I think it's either Shift O or O to cycle through these different guides. And then feel free to go nuts. After composition, there's also camera angles. Now, for food photography in particular, there are only a few basic camera angles that you have to consider. So you have your top down, you have your 45 degrees, and you have your head on or a dead front. Top down is ideal for, say, if you're doing group shots, or the food you're shooting, especially for gourmet food, fine dining stuff, where chefs tend to have very graphic plating for their food. Top down would work a lot of times for those kinds of stuff. Now, 45 degrees is also very common because it's the way we see food. When food is served onto our table, we see it pretty much from a 45-degree angle with respect to the table. And then you have your head on or a dead front shot, which is ideal for food with height, say burgers or sandwiches. This way, you're able to see the layers of the burger, and your flavor cues are all there. And then after that, after camera angles, we go to lighting. Again, another massive topic that will require a separate episode of its own. But briefly, we have your natural light and your artificial light. I would think for those of you who are still just starting with food photography, if this is the first time you're trying food photography, then more or less you'll be set first for natural light. And that's completely understandable because it's free. That's what's great about natural light. To get you started, since we're all staying at home, try to find a big window or any big glass panel where light is coming in. So I'm thinking it's not always the case where your dining table is near a window. So you will need to find a good light source where light is available throughout the day. And then natural light, no power source needed. So you don't have to think whether or not you've charged the batteries and the spare batteries the night before your shoot. You don't need to think about PowerPoints and where to plug your light sources. Natural light with the sun, you don't have to worry about it. However, natural light can be unpredictable. Say you've prepared your composition and all, you've nailed your camera settings, and then 1 minute it's sunny, and then the next minute it starts to get cloudy, and you have to change your camera settings again, because again, a natural light can be unpredictable. And then versus artificial light, which is more consistent. So as long as you don't change the power level, as long as you don't change your modifiers, artificial light will always give you the same quality of light. There might, I mean, if you're going details, of course, there might be um, discrepancies in terms of how consistent, in terms of color temperatures, artificial lights can be, but it's very minute that it's not worth going through the whole thing just for this talk. And then besides artificial light being consistent, artificial light is also controllable, and my spelling of controllable is wrong. So what do I mean by this? I mean, it's I don't. I'm not saying that natural light cannot be controllable, but it's just that artificial light is easier to modify. Since it's consistent, then you can adjust the power levels of your light. You can adjust the distance of your light source from your subject. What else can you do? You want soft light, you want hard light. It's all easily doable if you know the right modifiers to use. But yeah, so artificial light is much more controllable. It's also more powerful. And with this, earlier I said, right, like with natural light, your camera settings will depend on whatever is the available light currently. With artificial light, you can set whatever camera setting it is that you'd want and have your light adjust accordingly in terms of power level. For adjust the power level to achieve the exposure that you want. So that's for artificial light. And then, however, it can get quite expensive. From buying your light stands to actually buying your strobe heads to getting your modifiers, your reflectors, your flags, and all of these things. Modifiers alone, you're gonna spend a whole lot of money on octoboxes, strip boxes, soft boxes, your beauty dish, and all of that. So yeah, it can get expensive, and if you're not doing this for a living, it can get again pretty expensive. So yeah, I mean, for the meantime, we stick with natural light. You've seen my images also, anyways, from earlier, right? Like stuff for Pepper, for that stuff for Tamagoya, their Japanese restaurant, all taken with natural light, and you can still get decent results. Okay. Now, after lighting, there's also color harmonies. Color harmonies, again, same as composition lighting, it's a massive topic. And also, color harmonies can also relate to composition in the sense that colors will aid or reinforce in your contrast, in the way you work on your emphasis and subordination, your figure-ground relationship. Those things, color also help in aiding your composition. So the best way to tackle color harmonies is something that we are all familiar with from when we were still in primary school, your color wheel. This is the best reference for making your color harmonies. I'll go through some of the more basic and more common ones, and feel free to use these and then explore a bit more. If you want to do your own reading and research, go for it by all means. Okay, so first you have your direct complementary. So let's say the blue is our main color, and what is directly opposite it in the wheel is yellow-orange. So that's your direct complementary. Next one is split complementary. Whatever is directly opposite your main color, you split it and get the two adjacent colors. That's your split complementary. And then you can also do double complementary, where you almost form a rectangle of getting two opposing colors. And then you can also do what do you call this? Analogous. Wherein you get colors adjacent to each other. And again, color plays a huge part, maybe from telling a story up to just coming up with an overall aesthetically pleasing image. Colors definitely play a huge role. What else? What else is there? Okay, that's it for color harmonies. And the next one is styling. So like food styling and also prop styling. Again, two very, very big topics to be talking about. And what I can tell you basically is food styling. It's pretty much about how you're going to build the food so that it's camera ready, edible or not. And then prop styling, on the other hand, is anything outside of the food. So the vessel that holds the food, whatever props that you use to um, tell a better story, tell a narrative about the photo that you're taking. That will also come into play in under prop styling. And to be honest, I don't think I'm the best guy to be talking about food styling or prop styling. I think I'm not so sure if she's still in the audience, but Chi Chi is a really, really, really good stylist. So I'm very, very much nervous talking about this right now. um, Nonetheless, we move on to a quick time lapse of uh, a quick time lapse of how uh, I'm so sorry. I'm all over the place. After styling, ah, okay, it's important that I show you my setup. So literally, the karaage photo that I took and posted last night was taken in our dining area. So this is our dining table. So my setup. So you have my flash and mounted on a strip box. My camera, my trigger for the flash. I was using my iPad as my monitor. Um, my flatmate's groceries that has been lying around there for a few days. A spare vessel because I was contemplating whether to use this or that. What else? A surface that I made myself. My tripod, of course, and the light stand. As you can see here, this one is the second sketch that I did for the 45-degree, this setup already. So earlier on, my camera was directly pretty much on top of the food. So yes, there you go. So that's my setup. Now let's say you're happy with the images that you got. But being the art director, since I was in advertising for 2 years, I am art director trained, art direction trained, and editing also plays a big part in my workflow, in my process. So basically, this was my base image for the karaage image, and from this we turned it into something like this later on. So some processing, no, I'd say yeah, quite a lot of processing that went on, especially like with colors and stuff, and exposures, locals, global exposures. Um, I guess it's easier if I just show my process for editing. So my first step is do my initial toning. So just fixing general exposures, contrast, highlights here and there, and get my photo to like say 80% of where I want it to be. I do all of this in Camera Raw. You can feel free to do this also in Lightroom or Capture One if you have the money for it. And then I move on to Photoshop for step number 2, which is retouching. So all my compositing and all my retouching happens right after I export my image or images into Photoshop. So all the blemishes that I need to take out, any unspotted spills from the shoot that I wasn't able to wipe off, any stray ingredients that I don't want to be in there that I want to take out. If I do need to do some frequency separation on the surfaces, I also do that every now and then if it's needed. And then after doing my retouching, I do my general toning. So I go to more specific areas. So say I want to adjust the exposure particularly only on the karaage bowl or just on the rice or just on the mat. Those things I do next. And then after that, I do my color correction. So here is where I address if, okay, with the karaage, am I okay with how red it is? Do I want it a bit more red? Is the greens appearing as fresh as a proper green? Is the lemon the correct kind of yellow? So I edit these things in this part. And then after, if I'm okay with the colors, pretty much more or less happy, I do my dodging and burning afterwards. Now, this is more local adjustments. If earlier we were just talking about the area of the karaage bowl, of the rice, dodging and burning, I go into even smaller details. So if I wanted to exaggerate the forms of the karaage pieces so that you can separate them from each other instead of becoming just one blob of fried food. I do that in dodging and burning. And then I just apply my sharpening mask to um, finish it all off before I publish or send it to client. The next slide, I believe, is a time lapse of my edit for this. I need to play it. So there you go. What comes next? Oh, tips. Okay. So I guess yeah. I mean that's pretty much it for my process, and then a few more notes to take note of. Keep it shining, shimmering, splendid. I mentioned earlier talking about specular highlights. It's pretty much those little white dots that tells you this food is shiny. Because whenever you have your specular highlights, it gives the idea that your food is fresh. It's wet. It just got out of the kitchen, fresh from the stove. And when your viewer sees that, definitely they'd want to dig in, making your food photos even more appealing. So yeah, I'd say specular highlights are very, very, very important when shooting food. Next, turn your plate. In the same way that supermodels have their preferred angles, food also works the same way. Sometimes even turning your plate just like 20 degrees clockwise, counterclockwise, you'll get a totally different look from the food that you're shooting. And then sometimes closer is better. In this day and age where you have Instagrammers doing all these very intricate flat lays, sometimes it's better if you keep your food heroic and really just focus on that one main dish that needs focusing. So yeah, if you also go close up with your food every now and then, you're also introducing a new dimension to your food that viewers don't usually see because we don't always look at food like this, right? So one way or another, it can be interesting and it can work. So there you go. Now, what's next? After my tips, I talk about my travel and how food photography relate to my travel stuff maybe. So to those of you who are not familiar, I also take photos when I travel. So here's some images. I did a Tokyo set from when we went to Japan recently with my mom, younger brother, and my girlfriend, whom I hope is still in the audience and still paying attention. Yeah, so some images from Tokyo. I also have a Kansai set, a Hokkaido set, a Singapore set. Um, but in terms of like how I relate food photography to my travel stuff, to be honest, I they're two very different things for me. The approach is very different. That's why I have my Nikko Pascua account and I have my other than food account on Instagram. Because for my food account, as I was saying earlier, right? I have briefs to answer. I have objectives to accomplish. A client to please. So I always have to be thinking about that. Versus with my travel stuff, I do set my own objectives, but at the end of the day, everything is still dependent on me. It's all my call. So I can be creative as I want to be. That's why, okay, for my travel stuff, I want to do cinematic grading. I don't care if it doesn't work for everyone. This is what I want to be doing. However, at the same time, food and travel photography, it's still just both photography. At the end of the day, it's still me behind the camera. It's still me pressing the shutter. So as to how I relate the two, of course, my knowledge in composition in both genres of photography, composition is definitely needed. So your rule of thirds, your harmonies, your rhythm, your repetition, your leading lines, all these both play a part in food and travel photography. And then lighting principles, of course. I was talking about artificial light earlier and how I get to control it, right? But with my travel stuff, I'm using always available light. So, but of course, you still have to know how light behaves. In relation to my subject, I need to know where the light is. What's the quality of light? Is it harsh? What's the weather like? Is it sunny? Is it cloudy? So is it hard light? Is it soft light? How far is the light source? If it's say coming from a neon sign, um, so those things I also have to consider. So I guess it's the same understanding of light that I apply. It's just that with food photography I get to control it. With travel stuff, it can be a bit challenging because I have to work around what is dealt to me. Um, so there. Now, earlier I mentioned to talk about a bit about my COVID-19 experience. Like everyone, I mean, we're all um, into deep. Um, all my shoots have been postponed or canceled. All my travels have been canceled. I wanted to go to Bali back in March. That didn't happen. I wanted to visit Manila again, say in June or July. That's not happening. I don't think so. I'm thinking of going to Japan and November, going back to Japan, but we'll see if things turn out for the better. But otherwise, yeah, so no more travel sets for the meantime for me. However, being the optimist me, I do consider this to be the perfect time to learn new things. Um, okay, there are people who would say that, okay, it's completely understandable if you can't be productive in this time of crisis. And I do respect that. You do you. However, at the same time, um, if once you go back to your 9 to 5 hustle, one way or another, this chance for you, this extra time is gonna get lost in all of that again. So while you still have this, while you're not spending your time in your commute to work, uh, why not figure out your areas for improvement and actually work on them? For my case, I'm a food photographer, but this would mean every now and then that I also have to take photos of the chef, or I need to take interior photos of their restaurants or their bars. So with that, I also need to learn interiors photography, and that's what I'm studying now. And then with this, in relation to learning new stuff, working on your areas for improvement, I'd say this is also the time for everyone to hustle and bring in value. Bring in value to your audience in terms of educating them, sharing your process, Exhibit A. Um, if you can inspire them one way or another, that's even better. Towards your company, if you can bring more value into your company's results, that's even better. Because the reality is, with this whole crisis thing that's going on, the recession is on its way if it's not already happening. So people are losing their jobs, and the more that people see value in your work, the more they're likely to value you. And also, I mean, that might sound selfish, but also with your hustle, you're also giving out positivity, like actual positivity, into your audience or into your company or whatever it is that you're doing. So, some final words. You know how some speakers would end their talk with some inspirational stuff. So that's what I'm trying to do here. So bear with me. First, your taste is why your work disappoints you. So tomorrow, ideally tomorrow, you figure out what you want to cook, and then you take photos of it with the considerations that I was talking about earlier. You're thinking, oh, is the rule of thirds being applied here? Am I using the right light? Colors, are they all okay? These things. So you take your photo and you look at the image and you're like, man, this is shit. That's all right. That's perfectly normal. You all gotta start somewhere, and it's a good thing that you're disappointed in yourself, because it means you have taste. You know what's good and what's not good. So just keep at it. One way or another, you're going to hone your craft and get better at it. Next, my ex-boss said, create with your head, create with your heart, and create with your hands. So create with your head. Of course, there has to be some concept, some messaging to whatever it is that you're going to create. Because if you're not saying anything, then why bother putting out something? Create with your heart. Of course, it has to be something that you're passionate about. Something you're ideally something with a purpose, whatever it is that you're creating. And of course, create with your hands. um, there has to be some level of put into whatever it is that you're putting out there. Otherwise, there's enough clutter already in the world, right? So again, create with your head, with your heart, and with your hands. And then this one, I heard, I think like sometime late last year from BJ Pascual. He's a portrait photographer in the Philippines, really good. During he was guesting for this YouTube vlog of I don't know who, and he said to always prove yourself in this world that tells you that you don't owe the world anything, you don't owe anyone anything. I say also to prove yourself. You're only as good as your latest work. Um, and one way or another, you will have to show what you're all about. And you do that not to prove anything to anyone, but to prove it also to you, only to you. It's very important that whatever it is that you put out there passes your own standards. So there, with that, I thank you. It took us around 45 minutes, but nonetheless, here we are. Okay, now how do I exit? Exit.
No problem
And
with that,
then
Nika. Thank you so much.
we are done.
I'm back. Yes, I'm back. Can you see me?
Yes,
Yeah, so thank you so much, Nico, for that very informative and inspiring
I do
presentation.
hope so.
I do believe in that. Always prove yourself. As a creative, I think that is one of the challenges to always prove yourself,
It
right?
resonates so much with me.
Uh,
It's above my it's my main mural in my bedroom, pretty much.
yeah, but prove yourself to yourself and be sure to meet your own standards and not of any other else. Okay, so we have here, we proceed to our question and answer portion. All right.
Okay, sure. Let's see. I do hope I get to answer questions really.
You have a lot of very supportive friends in here. They're all saying hi to
Thank you,
you.
friends. Actually, like maybe
Subject.
90% of these are like my friends. So thank you.
Okay, so we have here a question from Sane. He's asking, food photography could be costly. How can we avoid spending too much, but at the same time meeting our own expected output?
I think you can get started with working on you work around whatever props I'd say that you have at home. Sometimes authenticity is key. So if you're making home cooked meals, then make it look like it was something that you cooked at home. Um, if it has to have a bit of incidentals here and there of whatever is lying around on your dining table most of the time, by all means, why not? As long as you deliver great photos, then it should be okay. And again, you just need to make sure that you have great light. Photography is about writing with light. So as long as you have good light, you're already, I think, like 50% there. If you're okay with your light. Does that answer the question?
I I hope so. Yeah, maybe we can. I don't know. I mean, maybe we can challenge our audience tomorrow for breakfast, lunch, or dinner. Maybe you guys can take pictures of whatever that you have in your own dining area or kitchen, whatever
Why
you're
not?
cooking, and tag. Yeah, tag Nico or tag us, Ted Singapore, so that we will be able to see if you're able to apply what we have learned in our session for tonight, especially with the composition, the lighting, yeah, and yeah. They're also asking here, what are your tips for mobile photographers? Do you always use DSLR cameras or what?
Okay, yeah. So I forgot to mention about this. I remember you asking me to give some tips on mobile photography.
Mhm.
Okay, so the thing is with camera phones nowadays, they're actually really good. Um, Again, as with any form of photography, whatever camera it is you're using, you need to have good quality light. So find that window, find that great light source, and use it. Even if you're just taking photos with your phone. Um, what else can I say? If you're taking up with your camera phone, you always turn on HDR mode so that your camera is getting more dynamic range, more it's getting more information of the highlights and of the shadows, and how do I say that? Compressing everything together. Um, so that way, yeah, there's enough dynamic range in your images. And turn on your rule of thirds, your grid. For sure, camera phones nowadays would have that option for you to turn on the grid. So do that also. That will help you in terms of composing your shot, even just with your camera. And then again, I can't stress it enough to have good light. That is always key.
Yeah, so you always have to play with the lights. That's the key in photography.
Yeah.
Okay, we have here a question again from Teen. For someone like me who needs to take pictures of every step of recipe in instance raw ingredients, do you have any tips for Teen?
Um,
You're
it
doing
can get
some
pretty
vlogs.
tough depending on how much is it that you want to how much you want to curate your content. If you want to be curating your content, then you will actually have to be intentional. I mean, it can't be like your I'd say a really good curated content. You cannot just be making for example, you're making karaage. You cannot just say, okay, I'm taking photos of the chicken as I'm putting it onto the marinade, and just take photos of it, because in reality, the chicken, I was marinating it on a tub of microwavable. So it's never going to be photogenic. So if you want to be if you want to create your stuff, then again, be intentional. Think first about what you want to capture before actually doing it. But if you want to keep things authentic, again, you just need to find a good light. So in your kitchen, hopefully, if this is Teen, my friend Teen, I know your kitchen has enough light, so try to shoot stuff closer to that window near your kitchen. It's always important to have a good light source whenever you're shooting whatever it is. And then what else? No, that's pretty much it.
So you really know how Teen's kitchen looks like.
Yeah, because every now and then, like I'd cook for them for their flat, or sometimes Teen would cook for us. She makes really good food, by the way. Uh, if anyone's interested for orders.
Okay, we have here another question. What kind of lens would you recommend in general?
Sorry, what kind of
Mhm.
what?
Lens, lens.
What kind of lens? For my food
Yes.
photography, I only use two lenses. I have my 90 millimeter macro with me for all my 45 degrees and or dead front shots, and I have my 35 1.8, both Sony's. My 35 1.8 is what I use for my top down shots. So for the karaage image that I posted last night, that was taken with a 35 1.8. I always use prime lenses because it's very important that you keep that you have the sharpest images possible, and especially with macro lenses, they are the sharpest, as in with any brand. So your Canon macro, your Nikon macro, your Fuji macro, Sony, and all of that, macro lenses will always be the sharpest. So that's why I stick to them.
Okay. So Sony lenses. Are you a brand ambassador of Sony?
No, I'm not.
No,
I
I'm just kidding.
For my travel stuff, I think my friends would know that I shoot a lot with the Tamron 2875. I love that lens.
Have
There
you
goes
tried
my
other?
hopes of being a Sony ambassador. But
Have you tried using any other camera brands before?
Camera
Does
brand,
it
I
make
used
a
to shoot
difference?
Canon. And I wouldn't have mind sticking with Canon, except that when I moved to Singapore, one of the things that my boss asked me is to also deliver videos for our clients. And I cannot keep on using my Canon 6D for that because the AF system of Canon, at least at that time, when I moved in 2017, it wasn't as good. So I had to move to Sony for more reliable video features. Otherwise, I wouldn't have mind.
So do you also like take videos of how you shoot your food,
No, I don't
like for
because
clients?
it like when I do video work for our clients, it's usually like a restaurant feature, like say they're opening or they just did their renovations or they have this new seasonal menu that they want to highlight and they want a video instead of photos. So every now and then I'd also do it.
Okay. So we have here another technical question. Which is better for food photography, ASPC or full frame?
Or full frame. It doesn't really matter. Um, Again, with crop bodies and full frame bodies, more than thinking about what body you're using, I think you also need to think about first about the quality of light that you're using. When I got started, the Tamagoya photos that I showed you first, those were all shot with a 60D, and I was shooting with the Canon Nifty 50. I was that Nifty 50 was my lens for a good 2 years when I got my first DSLR. So I've been shooting with with that for the longest time, and that works up to around I think what 80 millimeters. It wasn't the best all around lens on a crop body, but yeah, I was shooting with it for a good 2 years. Imagine as a starving university student.
Another technical question here. Hi, Nico, from JP. What's the baseline camera and flash power settings that you recommend?
Flash setting, it's really that's a hard question because it depends on like what light you're using. I can say that okay with my Godox AD 200 I would shoot I would start at 1.4 or one half power, but it won't make sense for anyone else. But for camera settings, I guess like if you're doing generally flat lay, for example, by flat lay I mean like you don't have it's all the food is all in the same height, like you don't have burgers and then you have like cold cuts board in the same layout. So if it's all in the same height, you can start with maybe something like 5.6 f 5.6 or for 45 degrees I'd also say start with around 5.6 depending. It all depends on what you want to achieve. But I keep my shutter speed at 1/100 because that's the fastest already in terms of sync speed that my flash can go. And then I keep to ISO 100 because I always shoot at low ISO. I mean, if you're shooting with artificial light, then might as well keep to lower ISOs. Yeah, I guess so. Yeah, camera settings and then light settings. There you go.
I'm not sure if this is some way related, but Joel Captures wants to ask, what kind of lighting setup do you use for food photography besides natural light?
Okay. I think a lot of times my go-to setup is how to say that almost side backlighting. So the light will be like at around 10, 11 o'clock of my camera, and so light will be coming from behind because backlighting for food photography is always almost pleasing. Because that backlight wraps around nicely onto your food. And then I just have a reflector, a basic foam board to fill in and help that key light.
Okay. Uh, Nico, Ranel Toledo wants to ask,
Hi, Renel.
do you have any food photographers that you look up to?
Food photographers I look up to. That's tough. I mean, it's not tough because it's tough in a sense that there's a whole lot of them. And back in the Philippines, of course, there's my. I also love the work of Gabby Cantero. Um, uh, in Singapore, there's of course Edmond Ho. The guys over at Alinea Collective. If I don't know if I'm pronouncing it correctly, I love their work also. There's also Chunurong CR Tan. He's also really good in Singapore, as in hands down. Really, really, really amazing body of work. Overseas, there's also Christian Lalonde. I really look up to him. Um, and oh shit, did I mention Jeannie back in the Philippines? Yeah, and Jeannie is an advertising photographer, and her work, yeah, just mind blowing work. So there, some names.
Okay, so I hope that helps you, Ronel, to on who are Nico's inspiration when it comes to food photography. So we have a lot of different audience here. We have from Myanmar. Hi, Sayon.
Ooh.
She's asking, do you always shoot raw for your
Um,
travel photo sets and cinematic ratio in post production? So it's other than food. She's asking, or she wants to know about your travel photo sets.
Okay. Hi, man. For my travel stuff, I always shoot RAW. Nowadays, I never even shoot JPEG. Even when I was trying out the X100 Fuji, I wasn't shooting JPEG. So it's all I always shoot RAW because I always love to have the flexibility it gives. Um, yeah, I mean, I said earlier that editing is an integral part of my workflow, and that will remain the same. And with JPEGs, I just don't get that flexibility that I need. And then, do I crop later on in post? Definitely. I always just shoot in 3:2, maximizing the sensor of my camera. And then later on, if I want to recompose some stuff, move things around a bit, I do that all in post.
Okay, I hope that helps Sayon from Myanmar. So I think we have here, I think he wants to talk to you. Maybe I can turn his mic on. Imadu? Yeah, he's been here since earlier, like very, very
Oh,
early. Imadu,
hello.
would you like to speak to Nico? Yeah. Hello,
Where's
Imadu.
our guy?
Just speak. You can just talk. Oh, anyway, he's asking, can we use 50 millimeter f1.8 for food photography? Please answer this.
Ah,
He's asking.
okay, that's fine, man. If you have an issue with your mic, okay. So to answer your question, definitely, 50. I'd say 50 on a full frame body is pretty ideal. It's quite versatile. It's mid-range lens. If you want to do your 45, you can cover all your photography, your camera angles that I discussed earlier. Um, yeah, 51.8 is always a good lens. Any brand. For Sony, it's 55. Um, yeah, on a crop body, it might be quite tight. If you're doing flat lace with a 51.8 on a crop body, you might have to do your setup on the floor, and you have to be standing to be able to take a wide enough image with your 51.8. But yeah, again, a 51.8 was my lens for God knows how long. So it's definitely a versatile lens and worth keeping.
Yeah, I also have my 51.8 in A6 400.
Yeah, yeah.
They're also asking about your aperture. What aperture do you use? Have you answered that earlier before?
It depends on what you want to be using, or on what you want to achieve. If you're doing like 45 degrees or dead front, I think you'd want to go like depends on the food. That's a tough question. It's all very relative. Um, on how sharp you want your images to be. What I can tell you, I think like from all these questions so far, right? Um, do not get caught up with camera settings. Don't get caught up with the gear. Again, there are iPhone photographers who have hundreds of thousands of followers for a reason. It's because you can use whatever camera or any computer you want to take images, but you have to learn the theoretical part first and learn how to apply it on a more practical side. Learn to understand light, how it behaves. Learn your composition, learn your color harmonies. Those things are very much more important, more than you. The whole camera settings discussion, gear talk. We can talk about the stuff that we're gassing about uh, for days, but it will not. More or less, it will not improve your photography. That will gear and camera settings. Those are supposed to be come in like next. Like once you know what you want to achieve.
Okay, so first and foremost, you have to know what you want to achieve or how you want the food or the picture to look like. So learn composition, the food shot, the camera angles, and lighting. So I just have a question about color harmonies, like or maybe generally speaking, with food photos. This let's say, what are the more delightful colors when in terms of food photos? Like this like some people they say, oh, orange makes it look more delicious or more presentable, things like that.
Mhm.
What's your opinion?
Okay. Well, if to those who have like an art background, then you're familiar with how color theories work and how warmer colors tend to be more appetizing. That's just the way that we are wired. So yeah, that will help for sure. But of course, if we're all just using warm colors, then food photography will be boring. So one way or another, you will have to use your complements to balance things out. That's why. For example, where am I going with this? For example, Mexican food. Mexican food, you have your reds, your yellows, and your greens. So you have that green part to balance out your reds and yellows. Sometimes also you have your neutrals. That's why, for example, for the image that I was taking, I also have my light gray background or surface to so that it's not just warm colors all over the place. And I didn't, earlier in my time lapse, I was also considering what if I want to add in a bit more green in the linen cloth to just add to tie into the greens of the cabbage that serves as garnish for the food. So did that answer your question?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, we have here another question. How do you decide if you'll use top shot or 45-degree angle for a specific food? I think you okay.
Okay.
How do you
That's a good question. And really, it's there's a lot of trial and error that goes into these things. Finding the right angle to take photos of specific food items. There's no formula to it. And sometimes even I feel like, okay, this food item, I feel like shooting in top down angle. I show it to chef, I show it to the client, and they're like, no, I think it will work better this way. So sometimes also it can be subjective. So yeah, again, trial and error. And then as you progress, as you keep on shooting and shooting, then you'll have your go-to angle. So again, that's why I was saying, for example, for burgers, it's ideal that you shoot it in dead front angle, or I mean, but also you can shoot burgers top down and just have the layers spread out a bit so that you also see what are the ingredients on the burgers. I mean, sometimes that will work. So again, no specific formula, but through trial and error.
Okay, so just trial and error. I'd like to see, if you have a burger, you'll see the layers. I think it's more appetizing if you see it this way rather than on the top view.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, I hope that
Although there are some photographers who can make it work. I've seen a photo of Joni Simon from the Bite Shot taking a photo of burgers in top down, and it works. Again, it can be subjective. At the end of the day, if you're answering a brief from a client, then client gets to decide.
Okay. Okay. Wait. We have here questions. How is it doing photography as your 9 to 5, and how's the market for food photography in particular?
How is it doing photography as your 9 to 5, and how's the market for food photography? Okay, I'd say I'm blessed to and extremely lucky to be in Singapore because okay, if you're going to ask me, I feel like next to Japan, maybe Singapore is probably the food capital of Asia, at least of Southeast Asia, because you have all these different cultures, all these different cuisines meeting in Singapore. So in that regard, the F&B scene in Singapore is very, very, very much alive. May it be from your hawker centers up to your three Michelin star restaurants. You have all of those in here in Singapore. So in that regard, I'd say it's a nice scene to be in. And then when it comes to my 9 to 5, in reality, I don't really. It's not like I shoot every day of the week, because that will get really really tiring. And also, since I want to be doing my own retouching for my photos, yeah, I don't think I'll be able to do that on my own. Um, so for my 9 to 5, there are times when there are days when I will just be doing like website maintenance for our agency, doing social media posts for clients here and there, or yeah, working on videos, editing stuff here and there. So yeah, it's not like I'm always just doing food photography 9 to 5. But whenever I do get the chance to shoot, that's a really really happy work day for me. But again, it's not. It can't be always like always on a high. There are some low days, some high days.
How much time does it take for you during the shoot actually, like including all the preparation, shooting without the editing process?
That's a tough question to answer because like the way we work is like it depends on like um how many days or how many hours the client would want to get us. Either that, or because sometimes clients have limited budgets, or they give us their requirement, and then we assess the feasibility of the shoot and figure out, okay, if the shoot is going to be complex, then we can only do 4 or 5 layouts. If it's a pretty straightforward, then we can do 10, 12 layouts in one day. So it varies.
Is it only for one client?
Sorry. One
For
client
only one
meaning.
client? Like I mean the layout that you were saying.
Yeah. So
Okay.
usually it's either
So
like half day shoot or one full day shoot with clients.
okay. So we have here a lot of different questions. Maybe I could turn on your mic so we can cater maybe 2 or 3 more questions. So anyone who wants to talk directly to Nico, kindly just speak out. Oh, mic. Right. So 1, 2, 3. Whoever wants to speak, speak.
Everyone's mic is being on now, is it?
Everyone, everyone's microphone is successfully set. So anyone who wants to talk. Oh, by the way, today, now that you have learned something about food photography, we would also like to invite you all to our another webinar this coming Sunday, still at 9 p.m. It's about travel and lifestyle content creation. So now that we have learned something about photography, maybe we should also learn something about how we create contents, especially for our travels. So I'm sure you guys have your what you call this? You have your pending travel photos, right? So this is the time for you to create content for it. So join us again in our webinar this coming Sunday, 9 p.m. So just register again on our website, www.weareteds.com. Okay, so is anyone saying something? Hello? Hello, everyone.
Dead air,
Can you hear?
dead air, dead
Are you?
air, dead air,
So
dead air.
if you're not doing these creative things, Nico, what else could you be doing?
Sorry,
What
if
are
I
your
wasn't doing what?
if you're not doing this food photography, what else could you be
I
doing?
think I'd be doing my travel stuff. If I wasn't doing photography, what will I be doing? Yeah, I mean, maybe I'll be back in advertising, being an art director. But yeah, I mean, if the question is well, like what I do on my free time, there's your answer. There's your answer. I
Oh,
play
so
also every now and then. Uh,
someone actually asked a question. What's the brand of your phone?
There's an Ibanez. But it's just a GSR series. I got it like all the way back in 2011, when I was still active playing playing bass for my band back in uni. So a long time ago. But yeah, I mean, I asked my girlfriend to bring it here for me.
Wow. Okay, so they're asking for a sample. I think everyone is set for food photography questions. If anyone is not yo guys, do you still have any other more questions? Garrick is typing. Have you guys eaten your dinner? I hope you did. So tomorrow, guys, we would like to invite you to take photos of your food at your kitchen or during your meal time. Take a photo of it and tag us, Ted Singapore or Nico Pascua or other than food, yeah? So that at least we will see if you are able to use what you have learned from our session tonight. Okay.
Yep, I am actually very open to like if ever you need tips, feel free to reach out if you need feedback on your work. I try my best to respond to people asking me questions here and there from my especially about my a lot of people have been asking about my travel stuff so yeah, feel free even for your food stuff now. So if you need to consult on anything, again you need feedback, yeah, let me know. Send over your photo, and I'll try to respond when I can.
Nico, you are very helpful and humble.
Yes, because a lot
Thank
of
you
these
so
things
much.
I have to learn on my own. So I try to give back also and share free information. Only to do, again, if my time allows, and only to the best of my knowledge.
Yeah, and we really appreciate that. Okay, so I think no more questions from anyone. We're just asking,
Hmm.
how do you edit or tips on color grading for your images to get that cinematic look for your travel and cinematic shots? Any tips
Um,
for that?
that is a very, very broad question. But what I can tell you is a lot of my edits happen in the tone curves, in my tone sliders rather. So your contrast, exposure, highlights, shadows, and then it depends on the cinematic grade that you want to be doing. I guess it helps if first you study what the great cinematographers or colorists are doing. Try to emulate that first. I can't answer your question in the sense that I'm not so sure what you'd want to achieve in terms of cinematic grading. For me, I started with my teal orange grading early on, um in my old travel photo sets, like all the way back in 2016, maybe 2017. A lot of Sam Colder color grading going on. Not my proudest photos, but yeah, I mean, later on I developed into moving to more excuse me moving to more I don't know, less common color grades. So I started doing yellow magenta or yellow green. So yeah, I guess that maybe answers your question one way or another. I hope so.
I hope that answers your question, Joel. Okay, so any more questions we have here? Okay, I think we are all set. Once again, we would like to thank you so much, Nico, for your valuable time and effort in this webinar. So, if any one of you guys want to connect with Nico, you can follow him on his Instagram. It's Nikko Pascua, and other than food for his travel photos. So once again, I would like to invite you also to our upcoming webinar this coming Sunday. So tonight we have learned about photography, Okay, so this Sunday, let's learn about travel and lifestyle content creation. How do we create contents for our previous travels? All right.
I'll be there. I'll be
So
there.
just yeah, we'd love to have you there. Just register to www.weareteds.com. And also, we would like to invite you guys to follow us on Instagram, TEDS Singapore. If you have any photos of Singapore, may it be something local, picturesque, or anything Instagrammable or touristy, just tag us or hashtag Ted Singapore for a chance to be featured so that you may be able to find an audience for yourself as well. So, any more we have here? Okay, I love Singapore. Yeah, we love you too. You, Chichi, I think she's very supportive.
Yes,
All right,
let's do a
guys.
meal when I finally visit back Manila.
So,
Thank
do
you,
you have any
everyone.
other?
Thank you so much for joining
Yeah, thank
tonight,
you.
today.
See you Sunday,
Yeah,
9
yes, yes, yes.
p.m.
I'll be there.
Bye.
Thank you so much,
Bye,
everyone.
guys.